Hello, it's good to talk to everyone again. Really missing our time together that we had in Baja, especially now that I'm in London and the weather is quite cold. So certainly missing the warm weather. But I'm here to talk a little bit about my conservation story, and wanted to start off by kind of talking through how it started and the bit of an unorthodox path that I had to get here. When I was a child, I was always in love with animals and always out playing in the wild. Going to aquariums was one of my favorite things to do. Doing tide pooling, growing up in California, was one of my favorite things to do as well with my family. But unfortunately, I wasn't maybe the strongest kid in a lot of the sciences or maths, and I was not encouraged by some of my educators to pursue science. And so I thought, I'm probably not a quote unquote scientist. So I sort of abandoned that path for a bit and figured if I'm not a scientist, I probably can't work and work with wildlife or work with animals. So I went a different path. And I sort of came back a little bit to it, or came back to wildlife and to animals when I moved to Thailand about 6 years ago from the US. And I started, exploring and reinvigorating a lot of the passions I had for wildlife. Doing a lot, all of my holidays were now wildlife based. It was almost impossible for it not to be. Going to the beaches, learning how to go scuba diving, snorkeling, exploring the jungles, seeing Komodo dragons in Indonesia. It was all around wildlife, and it just kind of reminded me how much I loved it, and how I sort of had lost some of that, or at least forgotten about it. And then it sort of started to culminate a little bit in my current role, working at WhatsApp and Facebook, and leading a team of folks there that work on illegal wildlife trade. Learning that there wasn't a lot of work there, in terms of there weren't a lot of people working on this topic, and so I started to realize that there is a good intersection between technology and wildlife that I hadn't considered before. So those things started to click, and I realized, maybe there is a path for me. Maybe I still can find my way back into wildlife and into conservation. And so that's sort of how I've ended up. I'm still on that path. Certainly not near the end of it. But that's my how my conservation story started, and where it is right now. Um, how did I become interested? I think what I mentioned before in terms of as a child, just always being inspired by animals and by wildlife. My father was always really into fish. He was the one that introduced me to aquariums and tide pooling. It was something that the two of us shared. We had quite a lot of fish tanks growing up, both freshwater and saltwater. At one point, I think we had five tanks going at the same time. So that was just really exciting, seeing them breed and seeing them give birth. That was just, there's nothing like it. I really love that. Um, and then I thought, thinking about how animals and humans should be treated equally, and seeing how much that's changed. And I think how, with consumerism and capitalism, how much a lot of that has not been the case. It's just really saddened me. And so I thought, there's got to be more that I can do to remind everyone that we're all one, we're all on this planet together, and that we are all equals. In terms of who inspires me, I think I have one sort of cliche one, and I would be sort of remiss if I didn't mention David Attenborough, since I am in London. But all of his work that he's done, I've read a lot of his biographies. Obviously, watched all of the Planet Earths and the Blue Planets. But just learning a bit more about not just those documentaries that he's producing now, but the path that he took, and especially back in the day when there wasn't a lot of interest or momentum for wildlife conservation. The work that he did through a lot of his documentaries, through his explorations, that was just really inspiring to see someone that was so passionate about that back before it was popular. And then the second one, I sort of talked about this in my essay, but one of my good friends, Sahil, he's been a wildlife conservationist his whole life, but he also had a bit of an unorthodox path, starting off as an anthropologist and going that route and really understanding the intersection of humans and animals. And I think, when I think about the future of conservation, that's something that I really think about. Is I think it's, in my mind, it's a combination of an intersection of three things. It's the people, so indigenous tribes, just how people in cities and society are going to interact with the planet and with wildlife. That's one part. The second one is technology. How is that going to be integrated into conservation? And then the last one is obviously, is conservation. So so it would be sort of people, tech, and wildlife. Sort of those three things, that intersection, and it's going to be about finding the balance between those two, finding the sweet spots where one can learn from the other. And I think that's, in my mind, at least in terms of the types of conservation that I want to get involved in, that's the future that I see. And lastly, any personal reflections that I've had, I think I don't know if this is indicative of the field itself or just with the Project Dragonfly, but I've been really happy to see the focus on DEI. That's something that I work a lot on in my job. It's something I advocate for and I've always been a part of. So I'm really happy to see the emphasis on that. That's been really kind of it's been refreshing to see that. And then the second thing is, I think this is less on Project Dragonfly and just on the industry in terms of as I've done research about it, but understanding how much of a gap there is between technology and conservation, and how little of an understanding that a lot of technologists have about what conservationists need. So that's been a bit surprising as I've explored that to really dive into that. But it's also exciting because it provides opportunities for me. Anyways, it was good catching up with you all virtually, and hope to see you soon. Bye.